Born from the efforts of post-World War II French rearmament, the AMX Chasseur de Char de 90mm, or CdC, was a tank destroyer designed by AMX, relegated to the drawing boards without a single prototype ever made. Due to this, the design slipped into relative obscurity until its addition to the video game World of Tanks, and today's video. Welcome to another Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host Wood, and today we'll be looking at the AMX Chasseur de Char de 90mm, a French tank destroyer that never left the drawing board. If you like what we do and want to see more, like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Following its liberation in 1944, France immediately restarted studies into modern military equipment in order to catch up with their fellow belligerents of World War II. A major contributor to this rearmament effort was the Ateliers de Construction des Le Moulins, or AMX. Formed in 1936 after the nationalization of Renault's facilities, it would spawn some of the more well-known French designs of the era, like the AMX M4, which would become the AMX 50 and the AMX 5120 Auto-Canon, eventually known as the AMX 50 Foch. With only 4 plans released between January 5th and June 26, 1946, the CdC is one of the more obscure designs of the period, with it gaining attention due to its inclusion in the World of Tanks roster. Developed by Favier, an AMX engineer, the plans are now stored in the Châtellerault archives and displayed in the Mémoire des Hommes of the French Defense Ministry. The inclusion of components common to the AMX 50 in the plans indicate that the CdC was a derivative of some kind, but its design stood out because of its light armor and low profile. The Tiger II and AMX M4 were about 3 meters in height, while the CdC was only 2.78 and had a weight of 34 tons, which was about 15 tons lighter than the AMX M4 and 50 Foch. It otherwise maintained a pretty conventional layout: a driver at the front left with an ammunition rack, machine gun magazines and batteries off to the right, a loader and gunner in the turret seated to the right and left of the gun respectively, a radio placed beside the gunner, and the commander sitting behind him, with access to a small cupola. The tank's powertrain was also located to the rear of the hull. Additional ammunition was stored in the bustle, and the pre-war practice of having a hatch at the rear of the turret was continued, with 2 doors on either side of it, though this was not really convenient, as they were far behind the crew and there weren't any roof doors on the CdC's turret. The June 26th plan showed a slightly different layout, with an automatic loading and ejection system and the likely omission of 1 crew member, though this is not confirmed. The tank was built around the massive 90mm Schneider SA-45 rifled gun, originally designed for the ARL-44, and it mated a new 5.85 meter long L65 barrel to a horizontally sliding semi-automatic breech of the pre-war Schneider CA Model 39S 90mm anti-aircraft gun. Its mounting on the CdC allowed for an elevation of 20 degrees and a depression of -10 all around the turret's 360 range. It could fire an armor-piercing capped ballistic shell at 1,000 meters per second that weighed either 10.6 kilograms or 11.2 kilograms, depending on whether the ballistic cap was magnesium or steel. An 11.3 kilogram high-explosive round at 700 meters per second, or a prospective 8.5 kilogram tungsten core subcaliber shell at 1,130 meters per second. All rounds were single piece and over a meter in length, as the rounds shared mostly similar dimensions and weights to those in the Tiger II, and the 90mm was mostly identical to the 88mm performance and ergonomics, though this also meant they shared the same drawback of their long rounds being difficult to handle in the tight confines of the crew compartment. Though undoubtedly on the higher end of the Western tank armament of the period, the SA-45 suffered from the poor state of early post-war French industry, with multiple defects encountered during production and testing on the ARL-44, and the barrel's poor mechanical properties limiting tube life when compared to later production guns. It is likely that if the CdC's design survived into the 1950s, the SA-45 would be replaced by more powerful guns like the 100mm SA-47 or the 120mm guns. The CdC's unique ready rack housed 36 rounds facing nearly upside down in a carousel below the turret ring, covered by a metal sheet to increase survivability as well as protect the rounds from low-energy fragments. This feature was present in both the manual and, though reduced to 35, the automatic loading configurations. The carousel could also rotate independently of the turret to present a new round to the loader, who accessed it through a small door which greatly simplified his job. With 24 rounds in the bustle and 34 in the front hull, the CdC carried a total of 90 rounds of ammunition, with the rounds in the bustle rack used to replenish the carousel and the rounds from the front hull supposedly used to replenish the bustle from outside, as it is unclear how it could be reached from the turret. The bustle rack, unlike the carousel, was unprotected, which affected the design's survivability. Two 7.5mm Mach 31 high-bell magazine-fed machine guns served as the CdC's secondary armament, with one mounted in a seemingly fixed position to the left of the driver and another coaxially to the gun. Regarding the CdC's protection, the hull used welded steel plates, with the exception of the cast gun shield, which alongside the front plates were 30mm thick and well sloped, while the other surfaces, possibly excluding the floor, were 20mm thick and pretty much flat. The front plates and gun shield could have been able to handle 14.5mm bullets and 20mm AP rounds, but all-round protection was limited to small arms and shell fragments, as well as Soviet and US 50 cal AP rounds to a certain degree. Other protective features include the turret actually being shaped to hide the turret ring, limiting chances of jamming, and an automatic fire extinguisher to the left of the crew compartment. Though they had no local solution for a high-power engine following World War II, they studied and used German components, specifically Maybach engines, and blueprints acquired from their factories in the French occupation zone in Germany. The Maybach HL295, a 29.5-liter water-cooled, fuel-injected gasoline V12, was chosen for the CdC, along with the Synchromesh AK5250 5-speed gearbox, a derivative of the Panther's AK7200. The French thought they could achieve 1,200 metric horsepower, but this was reduced in 1950 to 1,000 at 2,800 RPM, and further reliability issues meant that the HL295 was usually operated at about 850 horsepower at 2,600 RPM. Despite these decreases, the CdC still maintained a high power-to-weight ratio of 25 horsepower per ton, well above most tanks of the period. Another peculiar feature of the CdC was its suspension. While it used the then common torsion bar that is usually mounted transversely, it was instead mounted longitudinally, along the sides of the hull going towards the front at an angle. It is suggested that this was chosen by AMX engineers in order to reduce the vehicle's height at the expense of its width. With 5 double 1-meter diameter road wheels, the CdC's wheels remain similar to those used in German and French interleave suspensions. 3 300mm return rollers per side were also present in the design. The narrow tracks, however, meant that it had a relatively high ground pressure at 1.02 kilograms per square centimeter, or about 14.5 psi. The Comet Mark I, for example, had a ground pressure of 13.85 psi, and the Sherman with the HVSS suspension had a ground pressure of just 11 psi. To ensure a desired 300-kilometer range, the CdC had a fuel capacity of 1,700 liters, or about 450 gallons. Typical of post-war gasoline-powered French vehicles whose capacities were much greater than those of their Western counterparts. With references of a 6-hour autonomy without refueling, a maximum speed of 50 km per hour is required to maintain the 300-kilometer range, though the suspension and powertrain easily allowed for high-speed travel, and the CdC could achieve more than 80 km per hour while on roads. Though the French showed relatively low interest in tank destroyers during the interwar period, defeat at the hands of German tank formations during the Battle of France and the extensive use of armor during World War II led to a considerable post-war effort in the design of dedicated anti-tank vehicles, from heat slingers like the ELCs to ATGM carriers and AT gun carriers like the 17-pounder armed S-35 and R-35 hulls. The AMX CdC-90, however, used the tried-and-tested philosophy of a lightly armored but highly armed and mobile turreted vehicle. The CdC project never spawned a prototype, unlike those of the AMX M450, with the closest thing to a spiritual successor being the Lorraine 40T, and currently it is still unknown as to why that project was terminated. And with that, we come to the end of our look at the AMX Chasseur de Char du 90mm. Why do you think the project was cancelled? Leave a comment below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you'd like to contribute more directly, you can join the ranks of our channel's members or make a donation on Patreon or PayPal. And until next time, keep us in your sights.